Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm reviewing a book which has come to us from Oxford University Press. It's about asylum. The book is called Assessing Asylum in Europe. It's got a subtitle, Extraterritorial Border Controls and Refugee Rights under EU Law. Been written by Violetta Moreno-Lax, and it's part of the Oxford University Press Oxford Studies in European Law series. Elizabeth and I have given a book title for our review. Elizabeth was the lead writer on this one. Border Controls and Refugee Rights, a scholarly, detailed and up-to-date analysis. That's what you get. It's a big book. Let's have a look at it. Grey cover, grey and black there. It's heavy. It's a hardback. There's the spine and then a few quotes. There's not very much information about the book on the dust cover. Inside cover, that's other publications in the series. Then you've got some blurb about the book itself and about the author, and then we get to the book itself. The book runs to quite a substantial amount of pages, 550 pages. There's the index at the back. It's by page numbering. It's not difficult to find things. It's quite a detailed index as well, which I think is very helpful because it's an important subject. You see the index there starts. It's a substantial area. Very substantial selected bibliography. Again, huge amount of scholastic work put into this. You can see the structure. You've got numbers, you've got subheads and numbers, and you've got lots of footnoting. You can just see it from where I'm showing it there. Now the front of the book, there's the front page. You can see it's part of the studies series. The series editors are Paul Craig and Gráinne de Burke. Now here's that's a list of what they've done, and then there's the title of the book itself, this particular one. And then there is some information about OUP. Then there's the dedication, which I will just show you there. And we move on from that to the foreword, always worth reading, with any of these books, written in May 2017 by Guy S. Goodwin Gill at All Souls College, Oxford. Then there's the series editor's preface, always worth reading as well. It's an important book, acknowledgements of course. Then we got the table of contents, and you can see how it's structured all the way through. Detailed contents, these. Running all the way, and just show you the various pages very quickly. Quick flick through. Total number, obviously conclusions at the end. There is a listing of numbers, but it's not the actually the numbers itself. It's the parts which make up the book. Then there are the table of cases, which you've got quite a large number of cases. And then after that, the table of legislation. That is international instruments as well as our own local stuff, lots of articles. Again, quite a large amount of information. Then obviously there are different countries listed as well towards the end. Then you've got the list of abbreviations. Always very helpful in this particular area of law because there are a lot of abbreviations. They're not necessarily ones that you will automatically spring to mind and you'll understand what they're talking about. There we go again. Then you've got the actual book itself, the introduction, and then the detail. You can see how it's structured, and then you've got the footnoting at the bottom. There's a lot of footnoting, as you can see, just opening it up. So all in all, a very detailed statement of where we are at the moment with what is one of the biggest post-World War II problems to face us, which is the business of asylum in Europe, and all of the problems associated with the terrible difficulties in the dictatorships around the world, with people escaping and trying to come to effectively the free West, which is actually Europe, Northern Europe particularly. So what do we say then about the book? We say this: to say that Europe is now impaled on the horns of a dilemma over the issue of migrants and asylum seekers is probably an unlikely and admittedly an unsuitable metaphor. It certainly understates the extent of the manifold problems and the often dire consequences, both practical and moral, engendered by the influx of millions of refugees seeking safety, refuge and generally a better life in Europe. And one of the most recent titles then from OUP is this book, which grapples with the core of the EU's dilemma in all its complexity, and of course the fact that it is a very big issue on the doorsteps, no doubt about that. So perhaps, to oversimplify, asylum seekers have rights acquired from EU law, and that of course has been one of the biggest single problems which has led to where we are at the moment at the end of 2017, with Britain's decision to leave the EU by March 2019, with all of the changes that are going to take place. Quote, "The law is already there," says author Violetta Moreno-Lax, whose research into the diverse and various aspects of this problem goes back about 10 years. She provides a necessarily dense, detailed and quite illuminating analysis of the rights recognised by the United Nations, by the European Union Charter of Fundamental Rights to persons in need of international protection. I should add, because I mentioned it there, that you do have the UN statements as well, but this is particularly the EU Charter that we're talking about. Now, the bulk of the book discusses the principle known as non-refoulement, which includes such rights as the right to asylum and the right to judicial protection. The author presents detailed arguments and, of course, obvious evidence that there is a conspicuous incompatibility between these principles and the various policies, most of them stringent and often deemed necessary, which influence the realities of border control, primarily pre-entry vetting and other mechanisms of policing the borders of a state. And as I would indicate to you, what I've found on the doorstep is that the view is that the politicians have let us down in those two areas, and that's why we've got the problems that we have, and the electorate have voted accordingly. And you get some indication when you actually hear what they say that there is a great deal of unrest about these particular two issues, the pre-entry vetting and the policing of the borders. Now, the book's ultimate goal, says the author, is to reach a conclusion as to whether the current series of extraterritorial mechanisms of pre-entry vetting is compatible in European Union law with the EU rights of refugees and forced migrants. Again, that's a very controversial area. So this is one of the, and I do think it's a great addition to our knowledge as to where we are at the moment with what is a very major problem for all of us. Now, it's one of the latest titles in OUP's Oxford Studies in European Law series, and so this book is in fact timely indeed, as it seeks to shine the light of scrutiny on any number of critical issues concerning specific EU policies which affect refugee rights. And as the problems it tackles are at the moment well-nigh insoluble, and I'm afraid that's a fact of life, it makes it important and in fact vital as a contribution to the overall debate on, in the author's words, the intersection between borders, security and asylum. Let me conclude by saying this, because it's an important book, this one, without any doubt. Researchers, practitioners and policymakers, that includes all of the politicos as well, will find that this book, with its wealth of research references, provides convincing arguments in favour of human rights-based solutions to a range of almost intractable problems generated by the current refugee crisis. Now, I would say one other thing, and that is, whilst it's a human rights-based solution, that is outside the whole argument of the membership of the European Union as a whole, because that's a separate issue. Often it gets confused, but it's a separate issue. And can I say that whilst it is about human rights-based solutions, it's actually also going to be about numbers at the end of it all. And that's where the political decision-making comes in, not the legal arguments and the basic concepts of jurisprudence that we are developing at the moment. The publication date is cited at 2017. This is the book again. There's the front of it. The spine, you can see, it's a heavy book actually, this one, and it's a nice one. I found it interesting to read. You've got to have quite a lot of knowledge. Let me open it in the middle, part 2. Here we go. The rights of protection seekers under EU law and their implications for pre-border controls. So it's the rights of the protection seekers themselves, it's the asylum seekers, the fundamental rights and so you can see the structure. As I say, you do have to have a reasonable amount of knowledge of this. You can see also there's a lot of detail in the footnotes as you go through. Some of the footnotes are very long as well. That's one of those problems. By the way, there is a certain amount of paragraph numbering to go with the subheading as well, not very limited. Can I just say that one of the difficulties with the footnotes is that what you do need to do is, when you're reading it through, try to ignore the footnotes. Otherwise you get a bit bogged down. As I said, there's a limited amount of paragraph numbering in it as well. So thank you very much to Violetta and to everybody involved in this publication. It's a very important publication for 2017 and beyond. Bye-bye.